guys, my name's Scott. I'm the owner of Tree Tiny Homes. I'm going to go over some of the features and options you'll find in a tiny house on wheels. I'm also going to cover a few things to look out for, as well as a few things to consider when looking at builders or when looking at purchasing a used tiny home. They say a house is only as good as the foundation it's put on, and that's really no different with a tiny house. So we're going to start with the foundation, which is the trailer. So the only option really is custom tiny home trailers. They're custom built for tiny homes, for the weight, for the load. The weight of a tiny house, just like a home, is primarily around the perimeter, whereas most other trailers, the load is typically centralized. Axles, you're looking for very heavy duty axles. Double up to 24 feet is what we do. Dual axle, usually 7,500 pounds, up to 24 feet, and beyond there is triple axle. Jacks on all four corners. You're looking to take the load off and take the motion out of the trailer while you're living in it. So you're looking for 4 heavy duty jacks on all four corners. And then you're gonna either have to decide between a bumper pull or a gooseneck trailer. Gooseneck offers some nice features as far as towability, a lot easier to pull, a lot better weight distribution. Also offers some good living options as far as a full stand-up bedroom over the gooseneck, or some people will put a living room in there as well. So car haulers, if you see a builder building on a car hauler, or if you're looking at a used product and it's been put on a car hauler, I would probably pass it up. Typically they're also not as wide, they're built between the wheels, they don't have the wide body on them. So every inch counts in a tiny home, and that extra width can really make a big difference. You'll also see some features on car haulers, typically like a sloped deck or sloped tail for driving cars up onto. It's not really something you want in a structure of a home. You don't need to be angling stuff off the tail. You don't have to build to make it work rather than just build something that was intended for it. You'll also see wasted extras on car haulers that you really don't need. Slide out ramps, pull out ramps, pockets for side rails, or winches on the front, stuff like that. Also, typically they're not coming with any jacks other than the main tongue jack, so you'd have to add jacks to the trailer as well. Also, wood decking is quite common on car haulers. You don't need it. It's a whole bunch of extra weight, and really it would probably be best to remove it and then build a subfloor on. Basically, wrong trailer for the application. This one's basically a hard no. Recycled RV trailers. A lot of DIYers try to save some money, find a free trailer, cheap trailer, strip the trailer off of it. Either add to the frame, work on the frame, try and beef it up a bit, but you'll see in this picture there's really no structure. The intended use of an RV is to be extremely lightweight and portable, and that's basically the opposite of a tiny house. So if you ever see a structure built on one of these, pass it up, move on. So a big question to ask is, how is the structure secured to the trailer? So you want to make sure the builder that you're working with or the home that you're looking at purchasing, ask how it's connected, ask for pictures. There's really no standard as far as inspections on this, or even if it's certified as an RV, there's still no standard as far as structure or anchoring. I would want to see this as a minimum. You'd want to see your walls and studs anchored directly to the metal frame itself. So that picture shows anchored to a stud through the bottom plate of the wall, and that would be bolted through the frame of the trailer. And you're gonna have those probably every 4 feet or so. And then also, how is the roof connected to the walls? This thing's gonna be going down a highway, you know, you're looking at 110 kilometers an hour plus any winds, basically like being in a hurricane or a small tornado. So what's keeping that roof on there? Hopefully more than just a few nails, because if the wind gets under it and catches it, it can peel the whole roof off in one piece, as you've seen in some of the tornadoes and hurricane damage. So you're looking for what's called a hurricane clip or something similar that basically ties the roof trusses to the top plate of the wall. So siding options. This is a picture of our Columbia that I'm sitting in currently. That's a mix of material. What you're looking at there is a steel siding with a cedar accent. Typically for aesthetics, you're going to want to mix a couple products together. If budget's your main priority, you may just want to put one material across the whole thing and save some money, but typically it looks a lot better if you can have some contrast there. So with steel siding, there's lots of different options, lots of color options, lots of profile options, which I'll show you here. There's lots more than that, just depends on the manufacturer. And then the gauge is kind of important here as well. Typically in the residential industry or commercial industry, they're looking at a 26 gauge. So the way the gauge works is the higher the number, the thinner the product. So you're looking for a lower number. So with 26 gauge in commercial or agricultural application, kind of a minimum, you want to make sure it's going to hold up to hail and the dents and dings from rocks on the road. We use a 24 gauge on the wall, which is a little better than the standard. So wood, you'll see a lot of these built with wood, typically tongue and groove. Cedar is really the best option here because it's naturally a better choice for outdoor wood. I would still seal and possibly stain depending if you want some color added to it. And then for maintenance, sealing typically every year to 2 on a vertical surface to look after it properly. So engineered wood or SmartSide products, LP SmartSide is one of the brands. You'll also see some fiber cement products. I'm not even going to talk about those because they're quite heavy, they're harder to work with, they're also not as flexible for a mobile application. So the engineered product gives you a similar look, a lot easier to work with, fairly long lasting as far as maintenance. You get a lot of different texture and options as far as profiles. You can get panels, come in large sheets, typically 4 wide up to about 10 or 12 feet long. So you can have a joint that needs some trim, similar to the top picture here. There's also lap siding, more like a traditional siding. And then you'll get texture variations within those. You'll get smooth, like a wood grain texture and a couple in-betweens. It's a painted surface, but typically the paint on it's going to last, depending on your exposure, I would say 5 to 10 years, maybe even longer. So roofing, basically the exact same product as the metal or steel siding. I just go with a little heavier gauge on the roof, again, because of the impact of hail or stuff like that. So we use a 22 gauge on the roof. I believe industry standard is about 24 gauge. Asphalt shingles, you see them on mobile homes, modular housing, stuff like that. Really not a great product in general, and it's really a poor choice for a tiny home. They like to fly off in high winds, lifespan is limited on them. You're not dealing with a lot of square footage, you're better to just upgrade and go to metal. So building envelope, this talks about basically the roof, walls, subfloor, doors, and windows, and how it controls the climate from outside to in. I would ask your builder whether you know a lot about envelopes or not. Just ask them how their envelope's done. If they hum and haw or look at you like they don't know what they're talking about, I would just move on. It's a super important part of the structure, and it's going to have a lasting effect on the longevity of the building. What type of windows? So the windows are a big part of the envelope. We use a dual pane low E. That's kind of a minimum for what I would say in Canada. Upgrades from there go to more coatings or triple pane windows. Personally, in a small space like this, you're dealing with a lot of weight already, so a triple pane window is quite a bit heavier, also quite a bit more expensive. So a good medium is a dual pane low E window. Single pane would not even be an option for windows in Canadian winters. Framing material, most common is wood. Easy to work with, same as residential standard. Most builders are going to be doing wood. You'll see some talk about steel or aluminum trailers and frames. It is a little more lightweight. Typically it's a little more expensive as far as the cost of material, although wood has been going through the roof recently. Typically the labor is also a little higher on it. Big question to ask is the builder experienced? So if they built 20 homes, ask how many steel homes they've done. If they say none or one, they don't have a lot of experience in it. It's quite technical. Personally, I'm not overly comfortable with it. I'd probably entertain it if somebody asked, but you'd put me in that category as inexperienced with it. There's just not a lot of builders doing a lot of work with it, and you need to know what you're doing. The other thing to think about is thermal bridging. So that's basically the transfer of cold to the inside, and with steel that happens very rapidly, and you can end up with some moisture issues and just a cooler space as a result. There's ways to get around it, such as exterior insulation and such, but that's a whole other conversation. So into the insulation, kind of 3 choices here. There's more, but you'll see 3 common ones. Fiberglass with a 3.5-inch wall, which is what you're going to see in most tiny home construction, is an R12, and it requires an air and vapor barrier. It's a good economical choice, most common in residential construction. There is better options for tiny homes. So rock wool, typically by the brand name Roxol in Canada. R15, so it's a little higher R value. It's a little more environmentally friendly as it's a natural product. It's also fire retardant, which is kind of a nice feature. It also requires the same air and vapor barrier. So with the air and vapor barriers, basically that's the poly or the plastic that gets installed inside. That is as important, the application of it, as the insulation itself. You could have a great insulation, and if there's a poor air vapor barrier install done, you're gonna have some major issues, including moisture, condensation, potentially rotting and mold. So the best option, in my opinion, is closed cell spray foam. There is an open cell as well, but I'm not even going to talk about it because it just fails in comparison to spray foam or closed cell spray foam. So our value vary depending on manufacturer and thickness, but in a 3.5-inch wall, typically it's going to vary from about 20 to 24. It also forms the air and vapor barrier, making for a very tight air seal. So you don't need to worry about the installation of a poly. It becomes basically your poly. It also adds a huge amount of structure. So for a mobile product, that's a great feature. It acts as a glue. So it's basically like spraying 3.5 inches of glue in every open cavity in the structure. Very, very durable as far as transportation. So off-grid, that might be something you're looking at, talking about, considering. A couple of questions you want to look at, ask about, think about is water storage. So where are you going to get water from? With a tiny house, in contrast to an RV, I wouldn't recommend putting an internal storage tank. RVs are meant for short-term stays, whereas tiny houses are typically long-term or forever stays. So to put a large enough tank in there that it would be practical, it just takes up too much room. There's not enough room to put an ample-sized tank inside. So you're looking at external options. So whether that be a buried tank, a shed possibly, external storage of some sort, it would need to be insulated and you would need a transfer pump. Gray water, you got to look at what you're doing with your gray water as far as discharge, depending on where you're going to put it, how the municipality views that. There's an environmental aspect there as far as discharging onto the ground or subsurface, just something to consider. And then toilet, to get off grid, you're basically looking at a composting toilet or incinerating toilet. Do some homework on them. There's lots of videos, lots of reviews on different brands. Incinerating, I've heard mixed reviews on. Composting seems to be the standard in the tiny house industry. Just do your homework, see how they function, make sure you're okay with how they work and that you're okay handling the composting side of things. And the big one, I guess, is solar. So you need to know and design the house, I guess, to consume less energy. You don't want to consume a lot of energy and be on solar. So you need to minimize your electrical load. You need room for batteries, typically outside storage of some sort. You can usually do a shed on the front or rear. It can also be quite expensive. To be completely off-grid for an average sized tiny house, you're probably looking north of $15,000. So it can be cheaper than bringing power to a site, but it's just something you have to look at and be aware of. So mechanical, we'll start with the plumbing. Typically the mechanical, the hot water rather, in a tiny home is tankless. Again, like the water storage, there's not room for a hot water tank. So you're looking at a compact, on-demand tankless system, and your options there are basically going to be propane or electric. And what we do is primarily propane because of the power consumption with the electric. They consume a lot of power, which can be expensive. And then if you're looking at off-grid, they're really not a great option at all because they consume way too much power for solar panels. Tub shower, just look at what your needs are. Do you need a small 3x3 shower? Do you want a soaker tub? Typically, you're going to want to multi-purpose that as a tub shower combo, just due to space. And water filtration. If you know where your water is coming from, what's the water quality like? If it's a city connection, you're probably going to be okay. You won't need to worry about filtration unless it's very hard water. All things to consider though, as you'll want to give up a little bit of room for possibly water treatment equipment. Electrical, again, depending on what your needs are, where you're going to be connected, how much electric you have inside. Most builders will just customize the service, 30 amp, 50 amp, 100 amp. So whatever you need is basically what your builder can do. Just something to think about where you're going to be putting the home and what kind of service is required. Lighting, whether you do LED, which is highly recommended due to low power consumption and longevity of the bulbs, or whether you want recessed lighting or flush mount lighting or actual fixtures. HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. What is the heat source of the home? Wood stoves are nice, quite popular. It's a very nice, warm, dry heat. I wouldn't use a traditional wood stove, like a traditionally sized wood stove, as they're just way too large for a tiny house. You'd put a couple logs in and you'd be opening doors and windows, it'd be so hot in there. So you can use a unit like this. They're very compact, typically no more than about 12 by 16, something like that. Smaller clearances, so they take up a smaller footprint. Downside to them is you got to feed them more often because you can't put a real big piece of firewood in them. Also not recommended as a primary heat source, as if you leave the home unattended, you could potentially have frozen water lines. So nice addition to your heating, but I wouldn't recommend them as the only heat source. So mini splits, these are probably the most popular things you'll see as far as heating in tiny homes today. They're compact. The actual heat pump gets mounted outside, so there's good space saving there. And then the fan just gets mounted inside up high out of the way. They're also nice because they do the air conditioning, but the downside to these, at least in Canada, is they don't like cold weather. You're going to see a lot of American builders using them. You're going to see a few Canadian builders using them. If you're out on the coast, they'll perform not too bad out in a coastal situation. But as soon as you get into the -10, -20 and beyond, -30, -50 like we had here recently, they're not going to work, maybe at all. They're poor performers in cold climates. So something to think about. If they're going to be in a Canadian winter, I wouldn't recommend them at all. So the last option being propane. There's lots of different options here again. There's some vented, non-vented options, but in Canada, legally you have to vent to the exterior. You can't vent to the interior. So you're looking at something with a fan or something without. I'd recommend probably something that's ducted, like an RV furnace, where you can distribute the air to the various locations, to the loft, to the bathroom, and get good heat distribution. So another big thing is ventilation. If you're looking at a tiny house and there's no fans or way to extract air in it, walk away. You're going to have moisture problems, you're going to have mold problems, you're going to have all kinds of problems. So the areas you're going to be looking for ventilation in is a hood fan, just like a house. That's going to be vented to the exterior, not recirculating. Also a bathroom fan. There's no reason the bathroom shouldn't be vented. And an HRV is actually a very nice touch. So a heat recovery ventilator or ventilation. It's basically an efficient way of doing an air exchange rather than just dumping the hot air out through a bathroom fan or hood fan. It recovers some of that heat and cycles it basically. So finishes, as far as interior finishes, you'll see the home behind me. This is all tongue and groove pine, which is probably the most common finish. So it's 3/4 inch wood. This is painted white. You can just stain it or seal it unstained. You can also do paneling like a smooth maple plywood or paint grade material, but it's a little more labor as far as getting everything laid out, as far as using 4x8 sheets, and you'll typically end up with some trim. Drywall, that's a hard no for me on a mobile product. You'll see it used in modular housing. They also expect some cracking and they send people out to fix it after you move. It's just not a great product. I don't even like it in homes, honestly. There's just better products out there. So it's a pass for me on tiny houses. And appliances. So what do you need? What do you want in your tiny house for appliances? Stove, you can do an induction cooktop. You can do a little 2-burner propane cooktop. Or you can do a full range like this one behind me, 4-burner, full oven, all working off propane. Just a little more compact unit. It's 24 wide instead of 30 or 36 wide. Do you need a dishwasher? Are you okay doing dishes by hand? They make a little 18-inch dishwasher that works well. Microwave, again, power consumption and whether you need it or not. And then laundry, typically it's stacking or a combo, which does laundry or washing and drying. They're a little less efficient though, 110 power instead of 220 power. The drying capabilities are limited on them, but they're a good space saver. So builders, if you're looking at builders, ask them a few questions. Ask them what their experience is, how'd they get into the industry? Do they have a lifetime of experience in construction? Do they come from a design background? Design is fine, you might end up with a really well laid out home, but do they have the construction experience to back it up? Or did they just get into tiny homes through design? You still want the construction experience there. A lot of builders get into through the sustainability side of things. They're just into the environmentalism. Maybe they built one for themselves. Next thing you know, they're building houses. To me, if any of these are lacking the construction experience, you're not really a builder. I mean, you can learn stuff on the go, but for guys that have been doing it, home builders, tiny home builders, typically it's a lifetime of construction experience. And if I was looking to purchase one, that's what I'd be looking for. Ask for references. You can look for reviews on Google and Facebook, but a lot of times those are friends and family and people they know clicking 5 stars just to pad the stats, so to speak. Customer references, you'll see them on the website or shared on their social media. Ask for contacts. Ask to talk to the people rather than just the little 2-paragraph clip they wrote for the website. Trade and supplier, you might be dealing with a newer builder like us that just doesn't have a ton of clients yet. So ask for trade or supplier references. If they've had a relationship with a trade or supplier for 10 years or 15 years, you're going to get a good idea on what that builder is like through their trade and suppliers. So contract, make sure the builder has a contract. Make sure it's very detailed as far as specifications and timelines. Warranty, make sure your builder has a warranty that they show you in writing. Typically, you're going to have product warranties. You're also going to have workmanship offered through the builder. Ask how that warranty works based on the location. If they're located in Western Canada and you pull this thing down to California, how are they going to warranty that? I'm sure they either have a way or they're going to charge you for it or they're just going to walk away from it. So what's the fine print based on location? We'll honor a warranty based on a certain area and then we do it with a small charge, or we'll hire a contractor, if it's too far away, but ask them how it works. And certification, we could do a whole video on this, but basically tiny homes are either certified or they're not. And in Canada, that's a CSA certification. The States is a totally different animal, but we're just going to talk about Canadian certification. So CSA is the standard here. It's Z240RV, which basically makes a tiny house the same as a trailer. Wherever a trailer can go, a tiny house can go. That's significant for stuff such as insurance, financing, and sometimes zoning, whether you can park it in a trailer park and stuff. Often non-certified models can't go the same places that a certified model can. The other certification you'll see some builders offering is CSA Z241, which is park model. So they're wider, up to 14 I believe, but typically 10 wide. They're not intended for year-round living according to the standard. They also can't contain lofts of any kind, so we don't offer park models. They're just not very practical. They can run into issues with the zoning because of the intended use not being year-round, and the fact that they take lofts out of the equation, really limits the layout options. So if you see one that's claiming to be certified park model with a loft, it's not. So yeah, that's my warning on CSA certification. So that's a super quick overview on a lot of these components. A few tips what to look for in a home and in a builder. Make sure you do your own homework. If any of these points struck home with you, there's lots of information out there. Subscribe to our channel. We'll be posting more of this stuff as far as walkthroughs and more tiny house content.